This is Gesher, the podcast that's bridging the gap between the Jewish and evangelical Christian communities with conversations that matter. Here's your host, Ty Perry, with the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Gesher, the podcast that's bridging the gap between the Jewish and evangelical Christian communities with conversations that matter. I'm Ty Perry, Director of Field Ministries at the Friends of Israel, and today I have the privilege of welcoming back to Gesher my friend, Shlomi Bennett. Shlomi, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me back again.
So, Shlomi, you are a Jewish community organizer, and you're also the founder of Jewish Frontline. A Jewish Frontline is a grassroots movement centered on unapologetic Jewish visibility and continuity. Your work challenges erasure while helping to build confident, future-facing Jewish communities. And certainly, if we've ever needed those, it's now. So I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you.
So Shlomi, today, and just for listeners, so you know some of the history that Shlomi and I have together. I guess it's a short history, but I think it's a good history. We met for coffee a few months ago, and we're having great conversations about theology and politics and our respective communities. Shlomi being Orthodox Jewish, I'm evangelical Christian, and it was really Shlomi's idea. He said, we need to take these conversations and record them so other people can hear, and I thought that was brilliant. So we're doing that. And in formulating some ideas for what we wanted to talk about, one of the topics is a question that Shlomi actually posed, and I think it's a good one. And it's the topic of today's discussion: does Christianity need Judaism to be wrong? I hadn't ever thought of that before, and so I still am formulating. So hopefully by the end of this conversation, I have a little better idea of exactly what you think, what I think. Okay. So I think maybe where we could start, Shlomi, is talking a little bit about the destruction of the temple. And some people who are listening to this might think, wow, we're really going all the way back. But I think that event was pivotal for Judaism and for Christianity, because and you correct me if I'm wrong, but the Judaism of today, though certainly it's has its origins in the scriptures and in the even Second Temple Judaism, let's say the Pharisees of 70 AD wouldn't recognize every aspect of Rabbinic Judaism as it is today. That the destruction of the temple was significant and helped to foster what became Rabbinic Judaism. And in the same way, the destruction of the temple really was something that was defining for the early Christian movement. And so really, we started out in a similar position, but over time, now if you can see my hands, listeners, I mean, we're miles apart in many ways.
Right.
So let's talk about that. 70 AD, or you would say ACE, or I'm sorry, CE, Common Era. We have the destruction of the temple by the Romans under Titus, General Titus. Pivotal in the Jewish community, still remembered today, every year on the Jewish calendar. Talk to us a little bit about what's the significance of the destruction of the temple on Am Yisrael and the people, but then also how that led to, or how it impacted the development of Rabbinic Judaism as it is today.
Okay, yeah. So obviously the temple was central to Jewish practice. Daily sacrifices brought, several times. All day long, sacrifices were being brought into the temple. You had the 3 pilgrimage festivals that everyone was obligated, no matter where you were in the world. Everyone made a pilgrimage up to Jerusalem, to come to the temple. It was central to Jewish life. That was the center of Judaism. So when the temple was destroyed, the rabbis, or the Pharisees at the time, they had to figure out how they were then going to move this service, of God into exile. Without a temple, without being sovereign in the land. How are we supposed to then translate these daily practices? So then what happened was these sacrificial services then became liturgical liturgical.
Liturgical. Yeah.
Liturgical, yeah. So it became, the daily sacrifices then became daily carbonot prayers that we say every morning before morning prayers.
And can I just say one thing? So you said carbonot?
Carbonot.
So
is
that from korban? From the
that's
offering.
Yeah,
so it takes the
offerings. Carbonot is plural for carbon.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's right. So those prayers took the place of the daily sacrifices that people would bring. But then, at the same time, everything still remained central to the land of Israel. The way we count the calendars, the holidays are still, centralized to the harvest times and to the geography of the land. You're facing Jerusalem if you're to the east, if you're west of it. Wherever you were in the world, everyone is facing Jerusalem in prayer 3 times a day. This was, at the end of every Passover Seder, we say Lashana Haba Yerushalayim, next time in Jerusalem. I mean, Israel was just always remained central to Jewish practice, though it wasn't physical in the temple services. It just became symbolic, I guess, through the different traditions and the prayers. So I would say that would be the massive shift. I mean, that, obviously that's a huge difference from daily sacrifice services,
Sure.
having a temple, having the Kohanim, having daily, ritual life turned into praying and basically a mobile version of Judaism, where you can fulfill these things to the best you can without having the temple, without being able to physically bring the sacrifices wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, and that becomes important because you alluded to this, not having sovereignty in the land. So sovereignty was being, I'm not even sure we could say you had sovereignty in 70,
right?
But it was being chipped away even before that. But then by the time you get to the Bar Kokhba rebellion in the 130s, sovereignty's gone. Rome is going to be in charge, and not only are they in charge, but to your point, you said it has to be a portable religion, essentially. Why does it have to be portable? Well, because not only did you lose sovereignty as a people, but the mass of the nation over time is scattered. The dispersion, the diaspora, right?
Right.
So, can I ask you this? How in Judaism is the destruction of the Second Temple viewed? And what I mean by that is, what is the theological significance? Is it viewed as something purely, it was just the evil of the Romans? Is it viewed theologically like this was God expressing his displeasure with us, or something else? Like how is that viewed within Judaism?
Yeah, it is most commonly attributed to, or mostly attributed to, sinat chinam, which is baseless hatred. So, and
on the part of whom?
within Judaism.
Within Judaism,
within
not
Judaism.
the Romans.
So it
baseless
wasn't
hatred.
no.
Okay.
So the Jewish perspective is that usually, something external is happening to us, and then we look internal. What are we, what have we done to deserve this? How do we repent for it? That's always the Jewish look at it. So the loss of sovereignty over the land, the Roman invasion, is viewed as a, like God wasn't happy with. I mean, you had corrupt kings, you had corrupt priests, everything kind of, unraveled through history to the point where and then you had the Sinat Chinam, where Jews were just, oh, I'm better than you, or I hate you for not, following everything the way I see it, and a lot of
there are a lot of fractions at that
right
point.
there were, and and you still see a lot of it today, unfortunately, even within Jewish communities. What synagogue do you go to? Oh, you're at a Reform synagogue. Oh, you're an Orthodox.
You sound kind of Baptist, Shlomi. I think the Baptists and the Jewish people have that in common. Like,
that,
oh, you go to that church? Oh,
yeah. So that's a very big thing that you'll see within Jewish communities, and there's this division within Jewish communities based off of this, which is so stupid because obviously our enemies don't sit and go, what shul do you go to? They
don't care.
They don't care. You're Jewish. Everyone's Jewish. We're all hated equally. That, so we have to put those differences aside. But it exists.
Mm-hmm.
It exists, and it's like and there was a lot of it. It was amplified during during that time during the destruction of the Second Temple, and that is ultimately what we attribute the demise, the destruction of Jerusalem and the Temple to.
Sure.
Yeah,
and that makes good sense. I mean, that's biblical when you read Deuteronomy, for example, in Deuteronomy 28. God says, I've set here's the blessings if you obey the Torah. Here are the blessings that will come to you as a nation. You'll be secure in the land. You'll defeat your enemies. Conversely, and I personally take no joy in this whenever I teach through it, but conversely, disobedience to the Torah. It's horrific what you read for the cursings, but it includes being taken out of the land. That I always say it's like God just takes his hand off when it comes to persecution. He's still holding you, but he's going to allow the nations to go after the Jewish people. I mean, it's not a pretty picture there, and certainly the destruction. So from a it's hard to say from the Christian perspective, because it's kind of like in many ways saying, Judaism teaches, because I know many Jewish people who I could talk to 3 different rabbis and they'll all have a different perspective.
Oh yeah, you'll have 5 different perspectives.
Maybe 5 different ones,
from 3 different rabbis.
And it's not all that different in Christianity. And so I want to be careful. I certainly don't represent everyone, but I can say there are a couple of different views of the destruction of the temple and its significance within a Christian framework. Mm-hmm. So it's significant because Jesus prophesies the destruction of the temple some 40 years before it takes place. You find this in the Gospel of Matthew. You find this in the Gospel of Luke. I'll just read quickly the verse. In Matthew 24, it says Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. So the way this is phrased is always kind of funny, because it's like, of course Jesus knows what the temple looks like. He's seen it his whole life, but I think they're marveling at it because it was this wonder of the world as Herod had rebuilt and expanded. It's beautiful. It's not even done at this time when this is being spoken. But then Jesus says in verse 2, and he said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." And then in Luke, he goes into talking about you're going to see a siege of the city of Jerusalem. Yeah, this is all 40 years before. So it's significant. We just know even in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. But as it concerns the Christian view or views of Judaism, getting to our topic today, there are a couple. So you'll have some people who view the destruction of Judaism, or I misspoke, the destruction of the temple as the destruction of Judaism. Mm-hmm. So you have people, I just was listening to one guy, personally, I think he's scum of the earth, Pastor Joel Webbin, who is an anti-Semite. He's had Nick Fuentes on, and he embodies this whole cloth, and he basically says that was God demonstrating that, he just basically hates the Jewish people and he's done with the Jewish people. Now that's an extreme case, but even when you look throughout church history, a lot of Christians, theologians point to 70 AD to the destruction, and they say, see, this is God's divorce of Israel. basically, of the Jewish people. Now, I say that there's a variety of views because I don't hold to either of those. I don't believe that God ever is done with the Jewish people. He loves you. He's in covenant relationship with the Jewish people as a nation. And yet I would share your view that it is not, it wasn't just that, the fault is not just the Romans. This was God's doing, that he had this temple destroyed as, I don't like to say punishment, but as chastening of the nation of Israel. So as in, not just a, boy, I hate you, here I'm going to destroy your temple. It's a chastening in keeping with Deuteronomy 28, where you have essentially God loves this people, and he's going to inflict pain when he needs to do that to get Israel's attention and to call them back to repentance. But when we look at that time period, so the destruction of the temple, the Bar Kokhba rebellion is also interesting. So in comment here, Shlomi, but Shimon Bar Kokhba, I can't remember his actual name. Shimon, I don't remember. Bar Kokhba means son of the star, referring back to, I believe, the book of Numbers, the prophecy of the Mashiach coming under the sun of the star. Right. And so that was a title given to him. Right. Because a lot of people at that time in Israel believed, and this is in about 132 AD, they believed that Bar Kokhba is the Messiah. Yeah. And because he was leading a rebellion against Rome, and it was successful for 3 or 4 years. Right. But there was a group within Israel that wasn't following that. And these are Jewish people who believe, no, Bar Kokhba was not the Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah. And so I know a lot of historians point to the Bar Kokhba rebellion as one of the wedges that really divided the early, if you want to call it the Jesus movement, it wasn't called Christianity, these Jewish believers in Jesus from, Rabbinic Judaism, which will become that. And that split never is healed, right? It's like it just gets deeper from then on.
I didn't, I didn't think about the timeline on that and how that wedge could happen, or that there would be a group of recent Christians or followers of Jesus who are like, no, this is our man, this is the guy, who are like saying Bar Kokhba is not, I mean, I think Bar Kokhba was within mainstream Judaism was viewed as the potential Messiah up until the moment that he died. And then at that point they were saying, okay, well, he wasn't the Messiah, but he could have been. He was a potential Messiah.
Yeah, there's nobody walking around today saying Bar Kokhba was the Messiah.
Right, exactly. But I never even thought about that there would be a group of early Christians going, no, like within the land going like, no, Jesus is the Messiah. So this is going to be failed to begin with. Yeah. But, when you mentioned how Jesus was saying, oh, this was all going to be destroyed, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a lot better versed in all the Bible and the New Testament than I am. But at some point, isn't it in the prophets, it's discussed that the temple is going to be destroyed and the scattering of the Jews. All of this was already predicted by prophets before Jesus. So Jesus was really just kind of repeating what was already
set. It was that, even at the dedication of Solomon's temple, so the first one, God, and I don't have this passage in front of me, but God says basically, this can be destroyed. This temple can be destroyed because of disobedience. Now, and then we have certainly the Babylonians destroy that first temple. You have the rebuilding, and then the second temple really isn't much. Then, if you remember some of the generation that had seen the first temple, they cry when they see the second. Yeah. And so it was not real impressive. But then the second. The Herod's expansion is what makes it such a thing. So I think what Jesus is saying is not just, it is in keeping with what God had said, like that this potentially could be destroyed. But the difference would be here, Jesus is saying it's not just that it can be because of disobedience, but it's going to happen. Right. And so that's
right. And I think when reading a lot of these of early scriptures what Jesus preaches and what he says, like he saw the sinat chinam, within the Jewish community that he spoke to, and I think he
Baseless
alluded to that
hatred.
when he would say, you wear the large phylacteries and you are so pious and some of that, and I think he is kind of alluding to the Sinat Chinam at the time, where there was religious elitism, there wasn't so much love between Jews, where it was just like, I'm judging you because how big your phylacteries are,
Right.
And it kind of like people were already losing the point. They were getting caught up in the details of the halachot instead of the
Can you define that for my Christian listeners?
The laws derived from the scriptures.
Yeah. So
Right?
it's
The tradition, the oral law.
Yep.
The oral law. Yeah. So you have the written law, which is in the scriptures, and then the oral law, which was oral tradition up until the destruction of the Second Temple.
Sure.
So
That's a good point. I think, I don't know if I would categorize, if my understanding of baseless hatred, I think it would go even beyond that to a point, because Jesus, really in keeping with the prophets, like when you read the prophets of the Tanakh and their what do you want to say, their condemnation of Israel's leaders, even leading up to the destruction of the exile, the Babylonian exile. One of the things that the prophets are often calling out the leadership for, and the rich, is their oppression of the nation. And I think that's what Jesus, perfectly in keeping with that, he sees that. So it's certainly, there's a corruption in the temple. So, the events of Hanukkah, I love Hanukkah. I love, it's such a Zionistic holiday. But then you look at how the Maccabees or the Hasmoneans, how they become a corrupt group in themselves. And then you have the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And what's interesting is with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, you never see Jesus, you never see a positive view of Sadducees in the New Testament.
yeah.
The Pharisees, it's mixed, because you have a general condemnation of the Pharisees and of the scribes and the Sadducees, and yet you see some key figures who were Pharisees who are commended. But generally, you see Jesus calling out the nation, his own nation, for their sin and calling them to repentance.
Right.
So I think you're right. That's in keeping with the prophets.
That the prophets and that was the warning since the beginning. That will be the destruction of the people. That would be that not keeping to the Torah. The curses that come with them. This was all foretold, and maybe Jesus had the foresight or had the ability to stand back away, and see the bigger picture and say, listen, you guys, there's Sinat Chinam, and he actually, I wish I had my notes from the last recording session, but at some point, Jesus actually kind of reins in the mission and tells people not to go and proselytize or tell the gospel in other countries, but to go tell it to the Jewish people.
That's how it started, right?
So
to them only.
So it was to the Jewish people. It wasn't to convert the world. It was to bring them back to what he saw as the true meaning of Torah and mitzvot, right? Obviously, we could get into a whole discussion about how he ultimately in Jewish framework he kind of broke away from what was required in the Torah.
I'd say required of the rabbinic interpretation of the Torah anyway.
Well, okay. Well, it's the oral law. It's the oral law,
which we don't believe in. And
well, you don't believe in,
right? No,
right.
the Jewish people do today. But I'm saying that would be the part of the divide, really, to our point here. That there's even in that there's a difference of understanding.
So,
of that.
But actually, so you were just saying, you were saying how it seemed like with interactions with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, that Jesus probably had a more better, a more preferential view for the Pharisees.
I wouldn't say it's preferential. It's that he's roasting them. Pretty consistently.
Right.
But there are occasions. So the two men who buried Jesus are both Pharisees,
Yeah.
Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. So them saying the New Testament in general, it's not just a blanket, they're all evil. Like there are
Right.
some that are positive. Yeah.
But would you go as far as to say that Jesus was more of a Pharisaic Jew than he wasn't a Sadducees, right? He wasn't,
Right.
He didn't follow Tzadok or whatever.
So just so everyone knows, so the Sadducees is how we say it. You say it.
I'm probably completely
No, I
mispronouncing
think you're saying it the right way. I'm saying it, Baptist translation
Right.
here. But so the Sadducees are essentially the religious ruling aristocratic class centered on the temple, and they're connected to the Hasmonean dynasty. The Pharisees, I really see as commendable, at least in their initial aim, which was, no, we believe the whole Torah, or the whole scriptures. The Sadducees believed only in the 5 books.
I was totally butchering the word before.
No, you're
Sadducees.
good. I've heard it.
Yeah.
I've heard it in Hebrew, and it's nothing like Sadducees. So I'm going to give that to you.
Okay.
But so those are the two different groups. I don't know that Jesus is Pharisaical or Sadducean.
Well, but so like if he was following mainstream Judaism at the time.
Right, he would have gone to synagogue.
So that would have been Pharisaical, because the Sadducees rejected the oral tradition. That was their whole thing.
Well, I don't think they rejected the oral tradition.
They did. That's how
the Sadducees did.
The
Pharisees.
No, the Pharisees didn't. The Sadducees did. The Sadducees rejected the oral tradition, right? But Jesus didn't reject the entire oral tradition according to Gospels. There are points where he diverges from it or changes things around, but he quotes Hillel. Well, maybe he doesn't quote Hillel, but the same concepts are all brought down from oral tradition, Judaism. So so while there were divergent points, I would say he was a Pharisees Jew, because that's what Jews were. The Judeans were following the Pharisees. They were the authority.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there's a distinction, because he grew up going to shul. Shul wasn't a word then, but he's going to synagogue.
Yeah.
I would say he was not following Pharisaism, because he was constantly saying, this is what the Torah says, this is what your tradition says. So he was not at all in favor of the oral traditions. What he did tell people to do is, he said, he would point them back to the Torah, and he'd say, you've heard it said this way, but here's what the Torah says. And by the way, it's not just about your actions, but how are we to love the Lord our God with all of our heart? So this comes to a heart issue. Right. That's
v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. That's the whole basis of the Torah is loving God and loving your fellow. That is, but that's oral tradition. That's all that is. So that's what I'm saying. So I think in a lot of times when I'm reading through this, a lot of times he is calling back to the essence of oral tradition, when a lot of times Jews, and I see it through history of different Orthodox movements, where some groups get so focused on the technical aspects of performing the rituals or whatever, and they completely lose sight of the essence and the purpose of the whatever. So, and Tanya actually brings down this concept.
And what is Tanya for
Tanya
listeners?
Is it's Jewish philosophy written by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi in the 18th century, I believe. And let me see if I could pull it up real quick.
I think while you're doing that, to your point, I don't think that, I'm not saying Jesus was calling people back to a wooden interpretation of the Torah. That I think what he was doing, though, is saying the system of Pharisaic Judaism, in his view, and what he was teaching, was often at odds with God's heart behind what he said. So he's calling out the extreme emphasis on tithing, and tithing on mint and cumin, and making sure we have everything right, but yet losing why do we do that? Why was this given to us? So I think in some ways, sure, if that happens to correlate with the oral law, that's fine. But most of the time, as you read, especially the Gospel of Matthew, which is a Jewish-centric book or letter, he is showing the distinction between the oral law and the written. But you have something from the Tanya?
So no, actually it might be from Maimonides.
Okay.
But Tanya also quotes Maimonides constantly. But they bring down, or it might have been in Tanya, I just can't find the place, so I'm saying it from memory, but they bring either it's in Tanya or Rambam, Maimonides, that they bring down the parable of the king who hires the harlot to seduce the son, right? And now I'm thinking that I'm completely going off track with this parable.
That's okay.
Let me think this through. Let's back up. I don't think this is actually related.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well,
let's move on from that.
Yeah. So I guess the point being here, as we think about, does Christianity need Judaism to be wrong, is just we need to kind of detail where the divide happens. So that this divide between, to your point, I would say the oral law versus a lot of Jesus teachings, the division between Bar Kokhba and Jesus followers, all of that really, and the destruction of the temple, all of that is causing this, what historians often call the parting of the ways.
Yeah.
But then I think one of the things that, especially Christian listeners, please pay attention to this. One of the other things that happens during this time, so post destruction of the temple, I believe around the 1st century, and certainly into the second, we have what's called the development of the non-literal hermeneutic. So what does hermeneutic means? Well, hermeneutic just means how you interpret anything. In this case, we're talking about biblical hermeneutics. How do we interpret the scripture? And what happens is you have within Christianity, as Christianity becomes less and less a Jewish movement. So really, because of the destruction of the temple and the scattering of the Jewish people, a lot of those Jewish people were believers in Jesus. They get scattered just as well as a non-believer in Jesus. And with that goes the gospel message that Jesus has told them to proclaim to all the world. Well, it's going to get proclaimed to all the world because here's persecution.
Yeah.
And as they go out, a good thing happens, in my opinion. Gentiles hear about Jesus of Nazareth and what he has done, and they see him. Messiah doesn't mean so much to them in that context, but being a savior of them from their sin. Same problem. Jewish people have sin. Gentiles have sin. They see that, I'm in need of that too. But what happens is, as more and more Gentiles become part of the congregation of the church, the emphasis or the understanding of the Jewish roots of it all starts to get diminished.
Sure. And
not only diminished, but there's a lot of socio-political things happening here with Rome. But what starts happening is, not only do a lot of these Gentile believers in Jesus fail to understand the Jewish context in which it was given, and that he is Jewish and he claimed to be the king of the Jews, the king of Israel, they also start to turn on the Jewish people. And this is where the libel of all Jewish people being Christ killers, that libel has been going on for nearly 2,000 years. And what also happens, and maybe we'll get to this in another episode, but there is the taking out of context of certain things that Jesus said, or that the Apostle Paul said, forgetting that they were spoken by Jews to Jews, and they weaponize those against the Jewish people. So that happens. But what also happens is this development of the allegorical hermeneutic. And I know that's a lot what did I just say? So hermeneutic, the way of interpreting the Bible, allegorical, seeing what is written as symbolic or an allegory of what is plain in the text. Yep. So what happens, one of the things that happens is, for example, when when Christians read about Israel, they would say, well, we are the spiritual Israel. We're the new Israel. And because the bulk of the Jewish nation of real Israel rejected Jesus, God rejected them. Now, I don't believe this, but this is what has been common. And so if you can do that, now the Bible, both the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and the New Testament become very elastic. You can kind of make it say what you want, and you can weaponize it against the Jewish people.
So, that's so interesting that they did that, because it's literally an inversion of what is supposed to be allegorical. Like the only things, like the Bible, obviously we find things that are very descriptive, very purposely, everything's very purposely there. Mm-hmm. So some things seem to be, within a Jewish framework, when something is like, as in like when the elders of Israel saw the bottom of God's feet on Mount Sinai, that was allegorical. That wasn't like they didn't literally see the bottom of God's feet. Of course not, because God is not corporal. He can't have feet. It was described in a way that humans can kind of relate to. So that is always the Jewish framework when there are things that are not, describing God or describing things in a physical way, that goes beyond the proper metaphysics of the Jewish framework. Mm-hmm. We know that it's allegorical. Mm-hmm. So what you're telling me here is that that Christians have basically completely inversed this. They have taken the allegorical parts literal, and
not necessarily.
Because then that's how you apply corporal, being to Jesus. You can't. God can't be corporal, but you have you have to believe that in order to believe in Jesus.
I understand what you're saying. I would say that's a different category from what I'm talking about. So we would believe in the incarnation, so that it wasn't. That's different than what you're talking about, like with seeing God's feet, or like what I'm talking about is, it's not that they necessarily took the allegorical literally. Yeah. The problem is they impose an allegorical interpretation of the scripture, and they do it selectively. What I mean by this is that the Israel of the Bible, it's the believers, whether they're Jewish or Gentile in God. And so they spiritualize that. So the blessings promised to your people, again, I don't believe this. This is this view. It's called supersessionism, that the church has replaced Israel and become the new Israel. Mm-hmm. The blessings go to the church, the spiritual Israel. Okay. But very, very selectively, all of the promises of cursing, those we interpret literally as applied to the Jewish people.
Oh, it's only
isn't that isn't that nice?
Having your cake and eating it.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
So this becomes the predominant view. Now, thankfully, the Reformation was not without its problems, especially as it concerns the Jewish people. I have huge problems with Luther and Calvin and some of those. But one of the good things that happens is there is a back to the Bible kind of a movement, and they start interpreting it more literally again, as it was written, and that's remedied. But we need to understand that view is still prevalent today. Yeah. That when you talk about Israel, that means believers in Jesus, the spiritual Israel, not the real Jewish people. So I think this kind of helps us to understand that all of this, the past 35 minutes or so, has been setting the context, but that gives us a little bit of a framework for this divide between Judaism and Christianity, and how a lot of Christians have viewed the Jewish people throughout the years. So then now we kind of get to this question of, is Judaism in Christianity viewed as obsolete, incomplete, or preparatory? And I guess, and this is a question that you wrote down, Shlomi, so let me do my best to answer this the way I see it, is I don't believe Judaism is any of those things. And this is where, I don't mean to offend you, but this is where my view probably will not square with, I know it won't square with yours. I don't believe the Judaism if we're talking about Rabbinic Judaism, then I believe Rabbinic Judaism is exactly what Jesus was speaking against so often.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not going back to the actual text as much as it's going to the oral law and the traditions, and that it's almost like a calcification, that you have the text of the Torah, let's say, but then you have the rabbis' commentaries, and those commentaries have commentaries, and pretty soon it's almost like the scriptures are buried under all the rabbinic law or the traditions. So like, I don't view that as even in my view, not even a player. However, when I say that I don't believe Judaism is obsolete, is biblical Judaism as taught as elucidated in the Tanakh. So the Judaism that King David would have recognized, or the prophets, like that Judaism, I believe, is like perfectly pointing to the person of the Messiah. And so it doesn't find I think it's something of a fulfillment, not that Jesus just says, okay, I'm here and all that stuff doesn't matter, but that all of the Torah is pointing ahead. The sacrificial system, for example, is showing that God is holy, man is not, that the only way to come to him is by a substitutionary atonement. The whole idea of the sacrificial system is that something's happening to an animal that's not happening to us, right? Like Yom Kippur or something.
Right.
And so all that kind of thing, even the holy days, like they're pointing to the person of Jesus and his work. So I don't believe that it's been replaced, abrogated, nothing like that. I believe it's hand in glove. Like, it's all saying, look at what's coming, the biblical Judaism, look at what's coming, and then here he is, the fruit of everything that the prophets are speaking of is the Messiah of Israel. That's where I think sometimes when we talk about Christianity versus Judaism, it gets messy, because what are we talking about when we say Judaism? And what are we talking about when we say Christianity? Are we talking Catholicism or, some aberrant theology? I look at biblical, if we want to call it Christianity, but what Jesus was teaching, and I'm going to shut up in just a minute, but what Jesus was teaching is the fruit of everything that was spoken of in the Torah and in the prophets. So I don't view it as obsolete. I view it as pointing ahead to the person of Jesus. I know you don't agree.
Right.
So you tell me.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously I don't agree.
Right.
The oral tradition, I mean, that was passed down from Sinai to, from Moses to Joshua to the elders to the Nevi'im, to the Canaan,
but none of that's in the scriptures.
Yeah, it is.
No.
What do you mean?
The idea of the oral Torah?
Yeah.
Where is it?
It says I gave you my commandments, my Torah and my mitzvot. So that
but wasn't that all that
that refers to the 10 Commandments, the Torah, and the oral law. It was all given to Moses at Sinai.
Okay, that's where we would disagree, because I would say what was given at Sinai and what's always referred to throughout the Torah is the 613. So there's never a reference to the oral Torah anywhere in the Torah. So that doesn't come about until really about the 2nd century AD, when you have reference back to the oral Torah with the Rabbinic Judaism.
Oral Torah is application. It's all derived from, it's all interpretation of that of the written law.
Yeah.
Right. So you're saying, so at what point do you say that oral tradition diverged and became rabbinic doctrine?
Like a time period, or
at what point did it? Because there was oral tradition passed down from Sinai.
I guess my question is how do we know that?
That's oral tradition.
Right, but that's codified.
That was right, but that's I guess that's the paradox.
So okay,
right?
maybe this would help.
Yeah.
How at least not convince you or you convince me, but to express what I'm trying to say is when we say the Torah, so literally, in English it's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
So the first 5 books, but often Torah, when we talk about Torah, we mean specifically the laws found within those books, the directives, the instructions. So those were given by God. So I view that as Torah. Now, was there teaching about how to apply that? Well, probably. We see that with Ezra, for example. Ezra, it says he's giving the sense. He's reading the law, reading the Torah to the people upon their return, and he's giving the sense, like, what does this mean? But I would say that's never elevated to the level of being, this is oral Torah that is on par with the scriptures and is somehow mandated to be followed by all Jewish people of all time. It's more commentary, but without it, I think that's where when Jesus is so often disagreeing with the Pharisees, he's not disagreeing with them about what the Torah says. He's saying it's your burdensome commentary that's being imposed upon the nation that's the problem. So that's where I don't know the exact date on when that. I mean, I know it's post, after the return from the exile. I think a lot of it comes during the, after the close of the canon of Scripture of the Old Testament. So, or of the Tanakh. But I think that's where we would have a difference. Is I don't view commentary on the Torah as Torah.
So there are a lot. So quick chat GPT'd. And the question was, where does the Torah allude to oral law?
Sure.
So from quick search, we got Deuteronomy 17:8-11. If a matter of judgment is hidden from you, you shall come to the priests, the Levites, and the judges, and they will tell you the matter of judgment. You shall act according to the instruction that they teach you. Mm-hmm. Do not turn aside from the word they tell you, right or left. That's where. How are they supposed to instruct from if not from oral tradition?
Well, it's the same as when they would come to Moses. Remember, this well, but before there's the
right, because they came to Moses for the oral tradition. The oral tradition started with Moses.
But I would say that's where we would part.
So we just have to, right? We're going to have to agree to disagree.
Yeah,
on this.
Not in an unkind way. Just I think them coming to him for, hey, how do we apply this? What do we do in these situations?
Right.
That is like going to a judge and saying, here's our case. Decide between us based on the law. Right. But I would say the oral tradition and the oral Torah becomes a law unto itself. That's different. That's like basing it all on precedent.
Well, right. It's precedent. It's basically, but it's precedent based off of the Torah. Where's the first precedent? Where did Moses come up with these first, decisions? Well, based off of what he's applying the law through oral tradition. The oral tradition had to start something. What is the process of oral tradition? It had to start with some kind of either, the 13 principles, that is oral tradition that Maimonides brings down. All of these things are oral tradition. The logic, Torah is instructions for a group of people to live within a society, right? So there, before you had precedent, you had to have a logic structure, right? So Moses had to have been given that structure to follow. Do I follow the Mesopotamian law? Do I follow logic? Do I follow the Amorite logic of law?
See, but I understand what you're saying, but that's where I would say there's an assumption that he had to have a tradition when what he was doing was saying, I don't need to go to the Mesopotamians. I don't need to go to the Amorites. I have the Torah given to me at Sinai, and now you're bringing me a case, and I, knowing as the one who was there when the law was given, I hear your case. I see, what did God say? Okay, this is what he says. This is how we deal with that. Versus, he's not drawing on an oral tradition, in my view.
So you think he was just winging it?
No, I think he was taking the text of the Torah and applying it to situations that were brought to him. Otherwise, how
would he have known to do it right? Moses wasn't all knowing. He didn't. Right. He didn't know. He didn't necessarily know. So it was through prophetic, revelation that he knew how to apply these cases, which is a divinely given oral tradition.
Yeah, I think that's where we're going to have to part, because I don't believe it's divinely given in that sense, that it's an oral tradition.
Well, he had what we called Ruach HaKodesh. He had the Spirit
of God,
right? So he was able to,
I think that's
judge.
The key.
And so, based off of those judgments, that we believe that Moses had, Ruach HaKodesh, divine providence, he was able to establish the oral tradition.
But
so
Moses,
was that was that made by Moses, or was that God working through Moses? Just like God gave the Torah through Moses, he gave the oral tradition through Moses.
But he gave it to Moses, right?
And Moses,
but the Ruach HaKodesh isn't necessarily saying, here's new revelation. He's giving, he would be helping apply the scripture.
It was knowing how to apply the scripture.
Exactly. And that's where I would say, so like the 13 principles of Maimonides. Yeah. There's no way Moses had that, right? So
why not?
Because Maimonides is the one who invented it, right?
No, I don't think so. I think he
codifies
it, but those are all what Maimonides did. He codified, like Talmud. He took all of these sources, all these oral traditions that were just scattered around, and he put it in a book. So it wasn't that he came up with these 13 principles. He said this by oral tradition are the 13 principles of belief, of understanding Torah and how we interpret Torah. And that's how it's been since Moses creating the precedent to do so, and then teaching the elders, who then taught, who then taught Joshua, who then taught the elders, and it was then a logic and an oral tradition of how to interpret and apply that was started from Sinai.
Sure.
Right.
I see your point. I disagree, but I see your point.
We got to move on.
So this is more of a question that I guess we were discussing even before the show. Why living Judaism is a theological challenge for Christianity? Or maybe the question is it a theological challenge for Christianity? You put that down. Would you preface a little bit? What are you thinking in that? So that's a good question.
Right. So I guess the Jewish community wants to know what is the mainstream view? What is the mainstream Christian view on supersessionism? Like, what do the Jews need to convert and accept Jesus, or within the Christian viewpoint, can Jews, or do Christians just view that Jews need to return to their roots, and that we're all, have a path to God, or is it, is Judaism, like we said before, is it viewed as obsolete, incomplete, or preparatory?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
That's a good question. And again, there's so many different umbrellas of what people call Christianity. Let me say, what does the New Testament teach? Maybe that's the best I can do. So you asked first, like, what's the predominant view of supersessionism? Well, I believe the New Testament is not just does it have some indicators that supersessionism is wrong, it militates against such a view.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean people don't hold to it. So that's why it's like there's two different answers there.
Right.
So are there supersessionists today? Yeah, and it's the
Is
vast
that mainstream?
majority. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not within my circle, like within evangelical Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
you have some supersessionists, definitely.
Yeah.
But even there is an innate or an inherent philo-Semitism for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm what is called a dispensationalist. It gets into the weeds, but I believe every promise that God ever made to your people belongs to your people.
Yeah.
I'm not Israel. I'm a Gentile who's been mercifully brought in, that the church in this age in which we're living is made up of anybody, Jewish or Gentile, who believe that Jesus is the Messiah.
Yeah.
That's who the church is. But that doesn't at all do away with Israel's distinct role. So I read the Tanakh and I read the promises God makes to your people, and I say, Amen. Like, this is all going to happen to you. And in fact, Paul in Romans, he devotes, Romans is one of the most theologically rich books in the Bible, in the New Testament. And in Romans, there are, I think it's 15 chapters. Don't quote me on that, 16. I have to look. But he devotes 3 chapters to the church at Rome, primarily Gentile, with a question of, is God done with the Jewish people? And he says, God forbid. And he says, you want to know how I know? I'm a Jew. Yeah, I believe Jesus is a Messiah, and I'm a Jew. No way is he done. And he goes through and he says, it's to the Jewish people, to the nation of Israel, that God made covenants. He gave them the temple service. He made the land promises. He gave all of this to them. None of that goes away. Right. And incidentally, none of that is dependent upon whether the Jewish people are acting righteously or not, because it's God made those promises and he's righteous.
Right.
So that's where, yes, there are lots of Christians today who believe supersessionism, but that's not what the New Testament teaches. Now, and stop me if I'm not hitting your question there, Shlomi, but the question of is living Judaism, so this is the question, is living Judaism a theological challenge for Christianity? So by that, I'm assuming you mean the Judaism that you practice. Yeah. Is that like a challenge or a threat to Christians?
I guess because like you even said, like you alluded it earlier, that Orthodox Judaism, which I would say is the most stringent version of, or the most conserved version of Judaism.
Yeah.
That exists in the world today, you do not view as the Judaism of even the Second Temple period.
Right. I would say I find Rabbinic Judaism based on the oral traditions, not as much on the Torah itself. But when I guess to your question, like, how do I view Judaism, like Jewish people?
Like, right. So I guess is the right. I guess what is your view on do Jews need to be gone for the Messiah to come?
No. Like, shout it from the housetops, absolutely not.
Right.
So I believe that, again, all of the promises God made to your people will be fulfilled with your people. He loves your people. He promises all throughout the scriptures. One of my favorites is in Jeremiah 31, that the only way to destroy the Jewish people is to destroy the sun and the moon and the stars and the way. Like, no, absolutely not. Now, do I believe that, you said this earlier, like, do I believe that Jewish people have a path to God and Gentiles have a path to God? No. I believe there's one path, and I believe that because of what Jesus said. He says in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. Now, that's a big claim. That's a claim that divides biblical Christianity, not just from Orthodox Judaism, but from every other philosophy and religion in the world. Yeah. It's exclusivist, and yet it's also universalist. He doesn't say, only if you're, Anglo Gentile can you come to this? Or it is universal. It applies to anyone, but yet it is exclusive. He is the only way. And I believe that is in keeping with the scriptures. When you read Isaiah 53, for example, we read of the atoning work of the suffering servant that comes and he suffers on behalf of Israel. It's by his stripes they are healed. Like there's one way to come to God, and it's not an anti-Jewish
but
thing.
That's talking about teshuva though, by a Jewish perspective. But John 18 was that John was an angry little man. Sorry, not to be disrespectful.
John?
Yeah, that was a super.
What are we talking
full of
about?
Anti-Semitic stuff in John, though. So I wouldn't. I don't know. I take John with
John
an extra,
is Jewish.
Yeah, but
so
I take John
not,
with an extra grain of salt because John was salty. John.
He's Israeli. Like there's lots.
But no, where you see like. Suddenly in John, and this again, we kind of touched on this and other things, and this is the conversations I have with Mermelstein, where John, suddenly Jesus is calling everyone vipers. Oh, you're out to kill me. This, that, whatever.
No, look at the context, Shlomi. Look at the context of who he's talking to.
I'm trying to find it.
So when he's talking about, in John 18, he's not talking about vipers, but he is. John 18 is,
or no,
is
he
arrest.
called right. John 18, he called the Jews the son of Satan, didn't he?
No,
where was that?
Usually this is important.
Yeah.
So in the New Testament, when you see the term the Jews, remember who's writing. It's a Jewish person, or it's Jesus himself saying it, and his audience. Like to your point, who was he going to? He wasn't going to Gentiles. So he's speaking to a Jewish audience. So when he says the Jews, it makes no sense to, he's not saying all Jews.
Right.
He's talking about the religious leaders. That's who he's always having these confrontations with. Matthew 23 is one of the most significant.
So, but the kind of the shift in the way you see Jesus portrayed in John versus like Matthew's, it's very different style, guys. He's a lot more aggressive towards Jews, whereas in earlier Gospels he's more referring people back to Old Testament things, like he reaffirms the Shema. He says you have to l'reacha kamocha. That's the way of the Torah. Return to that. God is one. God is the true God. And then suddenly in John, it's the only way is through me. It's a den of vipers. Or
well, not exactly. I would actually.
I can't even remember all of this stuff.
Matthew is far stronger against. Like I could see many passages in the Gospel of Matthew that could be taken as anti-Semitic, because he is, first of all, Matthew is Mattiyahu Levi. He's writing, he's recording all of this for a Jewish audience.
Yeah.
And he's recording Jesus' showdown with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and he's calling them out for what he's saying is religious hypocrisy and oppressing the people of Israel. But in its context, it would be just like taking, if you read Isaiah or you read Jeremiah and you read some of the things they were saying about the Jewish leadership of their day, whoa, that's hot. If in the hands of Nick Fuentes, that'd be some hot anti-Semitism.
Right.
But when you recognize that the prophet is Jewish, speaking to the Jewish leadership, that changes it.
Right. But the difference between books of the prophets and the Gospels is the authorship and the time lapses. Some Gospels were written centuries after the time, right?
No, they were all written within 100 years of. The last one was written
decades. Sorry, decades. Decades. But also you see this so often in Jewish communities. The butthurt Jew who just feels like he has to burn everything, and you see some of the most vile anti-Semites are Jews.
Okay.
So if they feel rejected by their people or they feel persecuted by the Jews, and and so often you see this happen where a guy goes and someone goes and tries to join some kind of scholarship, gets rejected, is completely hurt, so he then goes and disparages the scholars. This is like such a common pattern,
Okay.
So it's like, yes, obviously you believe that everything that's written and quoted by Jesus said, but that's not how I read it. I read it as written by the author, basically.
Yeah. What's interesting is, I see what you're saying. What's interesting is the New Testament. So John is an eyewitness.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew is an eyewitness.
Mm-hmm.
They could not have written things where, there's witnesses to all of these things. They could not have written those things and gotten away with it. There were other people there who were listening to them. The other thing is, a lot of these things are corroborated from different sources.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, the nice clean way would be to say John just sat down and he wrote a diatribe against the Jewish people somehow. I don't think that stands up when you read the text, but let's just say he did.
Yeah.
And he sold that as kind of his ideology.
Yeah.
It doesn't work when you read all of the Gospels, and because there's actually what are called harmonies of the Gospels,
Mm-hmm.
where they take all the Gospel writers and they put what they wrote together, so you can see Matthew says the same thing John does, and
Mm-hmm.
Mark, and then Luke, and so it doesn't quite hold up that way. But I think we need to have an episode on that.
Yeah,
on the
we do.
anti-Semitism.
And I want to get Mermelstein on here. He'd
I
be
would enjoy
amazing,
that
because
conversation.
he's been studying this for years and years, and
Sure.
I was just kind of going off of what he has told me, and he knows it. So he's been studying the subject for a few years now.
Yeah.
And I would love to see you guys down together for a conversation. I think it would be super interesting.
That'd be wonderful.
Let's
go on.
But
We
yeah.
probably should wrap up here. But let's just quickly want to ask you this question, or you kind of put this question down. Can Christianity affirm Torah permanence without contradiction? What do you mean by that, Shlomi?
So it's basically inverse. Do we need Christianity to be wrong? And the answer is no. Do we need to believe it for ourselves? No. But we don't need the world to not believe it.
You see it as serving a purpose.
It serves a purpose.
Okay.
It's so while and I said this earlier, while it's not doctrinally correct for a Jewish framework, it is absolutely necessary for divine design, as Maimonides put it. That all of these things have all these developments throughout history has ultimately spread the knowledge of the God of Israel to every corner of the earth. Has made it possible for the eventual ingathering of the diaspora back to the land of Israel. Everything that has happened, literally, and while you were saying this, again, I wasn't thinking about the Christian timeline of the destruction of the Second Temple, but what you just told me earlier basically was the fix. The fix was in the destruction.
What do you mean?
So how would have, after the destruction of the temple, had there not been Christianity, Christian Jews following already this happening before the destruction, to then get scattered with the rest of the Jews, and then they create, this religion, Christianity comes, that is then relatable to people, that people are like, oh, Jesus knows me. I know Jesus. And now I'm learning, I'm coming to know God through Jesus, which would have been completely unrelatable to someone maybe, without that.
They're all pagans.
Pagans,
Yeah.
right? So for literally the prophetic, messianic age, this all had to this all happened, and Christians, so Christians and Christian Jews, and then the destruction of the temple, and the Christians being scattered with the Jews at the destruction of the temple was literally all designed for then, yes, anti-Semitism happens, the spread of Christianity, obviously the blood libels, pogroms, and crusades, and all kinds of horrible things happened to Jews with the rise of Christianity throughout history. But none of this would have been, all of this was necessary to get us to a point where we can now turn around and say, everyone knows the God of Israel. We are looking at a messianic age where, this is possible. The Jews are sovereign in the land of Israel again. We can literally hop on the wings of eagles and fly back to Israel, and the God is known at every corner.
Eagles, huh?
El Eagles, yeah, and yeah, it's tremendous. Yeah.
That's I appreciate that perspective. And again, there's a lot that we could talk about there. I would agree with you in many ways. I mean, I believe that God is sovereign, so that He is the author of history. He is. It doesn't mean that He is making Shlomi make decisions every day, or whoever the president is, or anybody. We have a free will, and yet He is ultimately He's using all those things to accomplish exactly what He wants accomplished, and that means He can take evil things and He can take good things and He can use those for His purposes. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective. Let's talk about just finally here, respectful dialogue and its limits. So hopefully listeners didn't get panicked at all while they're listening to this. Shlomi and I are good friends, and we get passionate about these things. Yeah. And just so you know, like, we're going to get done here and we're going to go eat lunch together. Yeah. So it's not a personal thing. But this dialogue, I think, that you and I are having is profitable, because I'm learning more from you about your views. Yeah. You're learning from me. There's going to be an episode that we'll release in a little while about our shared view of Israel and the role of Zionism. Like, we have a lot in common. Yeah. But what do you think about dialogue, like between I'm not going to say just Christians, I'm saying Bible-believing Christians like me, who actually know what the Scripture says, and Jewish people? Yeah. What do you think the future looks like? What do you think it should look like? Any thoughts on that?
I want to see more confident Jewish engagement with our evangelical neighbors. Do I think it's possible? I think it's possible. I think Jews need to educate themselves more. Okay. I think we need to. Well,
Christians too.
But I think that's going to happen with more Jews who have a deeper understanding of themselves, because I think the tension has always been, well, like, I'm not well grounded enough in my own beliefs, and so I maybe subconsciously feel threatened by someone else's beliefs. Maybe they'll rock me away from this, So I think it all comes from fragility ultimately. Okay. So if Jews were more grounded in their texts, then they would be able to feel more comfortable in having these discussions. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I'm challenging myself to read through Maimonides in a year, so it's 3 chapters a day, and they're talking about in one of the sections, it's talking about how to deal with idol worshipers. Now, according to Maimonides, you're an idol worshiper, so there's a whole set of rules about things that I am allowed and not allowed to do, with you. And that includes, like, just engaging in the New Testament and having these conversations, and because it is like one of the safeguard around the fence around the Torah. It's a safeguard. They're trying to, like, protect the people who don't have the mental fortitude to think for themselves and have the right understanding. Do I consider myself a scholar? By no means, but You're
very educated.
I've been exposed, so I feel comfortable doing this. Do I think do I think every Jew should go and debate theology? No. I think every Jew needs to get grounded in their text so that they can feel comfortable next to their neighbors. And not every, you don't have to have, not every evangelical, not every Jew has to get together and have these conversations that me and Ty are having together, but what we should take away from this is that even though we're disagreeing and we don't agree with everything and our theologies don't match, we're still going to go get lunch together. It doesn't matter. We're friends. We still want the best for each other. We still want, we're both red-blooded Americans. We both still want peace and happiness, prosperity, that's still the same. That's still the same. We still both believe in a God of Israel. We both, believe in Judeo-Christian values. These are the core tenets of what makes us Americans, and so it would be, ultimately, is it any different? You call yourself a Gentile. I think you're a sojourner. You're more like, you're closer to like, you're a pious, I don't know, you're good in that, in the eyes of God, I would say. You're as aside from
go ahead, Shlomi.
I would say, aside from the belief in Jesus, you literally are following everything the way God wants you to. So God and the belief in Jesus is what has brought you towards all of those things, then that is, then great, then perfect, then keep doing it, because all of those other things that make you, who you are because of the belief in Jesus, God loves you for it. God loves you for it, If anyone, again, and we talked about this in previous episode, but if you're wondering how Jews view Gentiles, we don't think that everyone needs to be Jewish or follow the Torah, or that you need to convert. We believe in the 7 Noahide laws that the nations of the world are bound by a covenant that was set with Noah. Follow the 7 Noahide laws. That's don't steal, don't kill, don't eat flesh off a live animal. Set up courts of justice. Respect your parents, I think, was one of them.
I don't know what they're.
I'm not, but it's very basic, very easy stuff. It's not 613 commandments set with oral law and all this other, crazy tradition. You can easily be righteous with God. Don't serve idols.
So I'm breaking it.
You are, so that's what I'm saying. So
according to you,
right. By believing in Jesus, according to the Jewish framework, you are serving idols, but ultimately, we feel that that's much better than not doing anything at all.
Well, Shlomi, I appreciate your perspective.
I appreciate you putting up with my perspective.
No. I enjoy talking with you. This is probably one of those episodes where it's like, do these guys agree on anything? But stay tuned, because we will have some episodes coming up where we talk about the things that do unite us. So I encourage you to listen to those. And Shlomi, I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I appreciate your perspective and just being able to dialogue with you very openly and honestly.
You as well. Thank you.
You've been listening to Gesher, a ministry outreach production of FOI Equip, your free resource for learning and engaging with the scriptures from a Jewish perspective. To learn more, visit foiequip.org. And for more information about Ty, visit foi.org/Perry. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Shalom.